In the vast archive of emergency service recordings, most calls follow a predictable pattern: a frantic voice, a plea for help, and a dispatcher guiding them to safety. But on a freezing December night in 2021, a handler in the control room was connected to something entirely different. For nearly 15 minutes, the line remained open, transmitting not a direct conversation, but the chaotic, muffled soundtrack of a nightmare unfolding in real time. There were shouts in foreign tongues, the sickening thud of heavy impacts, and desperate commands barked in English. The operator wasn't just listening to a disturbance. They were the unintended digital witness to a fatal event that would later expose the terrifying underbelly of Britain's suburban drug trade. This wasn't a pocket dial. It was a lifeline snatched away, recording the exact moment a life was extinguished. To understand how a quiet, residential street in Tunbridge Wells became the stage for such a severe tragedy, we must look beyond the manicured lawns and sleepy facades. Tunbridge Wells is known for its spa waters and affluent history, not for organized crime. Yet precisely because of this unsuspecting veneer, it became the perfect cover for a high-stakes operation. The property on Caley Road was no longer a home. It had been hollowed out and transformed into an industrial fortress. Inside, the domestic warmth had been replaced by blinding hydroponic lights, labyrinthine ventilation systems, and a crop worth hundreds of thousands of pounds. This transformation is the signature of a specific and powerful entity: the Albanian organized crime networks. Over the last decade, the landscape of the UK's illicit cannabis trade has shifted tectonically. Where Vietnamese groups once held sway, highly disciplined Balkan syndicates have moved in, bringing with them a level of ruthlessness and efficiency that law enforcement struggles to contain. According to the National Crime Agency, these groups now dominate the market, controlling the supply chain from the mountains of Albania to the street corners of London. Their dominance is built on a model of absolute control. These are not amateur setups. They are professional enterprises, protected by reinforced steel gates, advanced surveillance and human assets, who live and breathe the operation. The statistics paint a stark picture of this influence. Official data indicates that a significant portion of foreign nationals within the UK prison system hail from this region, incarcerated for offences ranging from large-scale production to severe acts of violence. But for every individual detained, the network simply adapts, recruits and expands. The house on Caley Road was a prime example of this model. It was designed to be impenetrable, a bank vault for green gold. But the architects of this fortress forgot one thing: when you build a cage to keep intruders out, you also build a trap that keeps your own people in. On that December night, the steel defenses designed to protect the crop would ultimately seal the fate of the young man guarding it. He was part of a hierarchy that viewed him as an asset to be deployed, while outside, a rival crew viewed him as an obstacle to be removed. As the clock ticked past 3:00 a.m., two colliding forces, greed and survival, were about to meet in the dark, and the only testimony would be that open phone line, recording every second of the ensuing chaos. Xhovan Pepaj was not a mastermind of the underworld. He was 25 years old, a young man far from home, caught in the intricate machinery of a criminal enterprise that viewed him as little more than a disposable component. Like many who find themselves tending these illicit crops, Pepaj had arrived in the UK, seeking opportunity, only to find himself indebted and entrapped. His role was that of a gardener, a deceptively peaceful title for a job fraught with extreme peril. Living inside the fortified property on Caley Road, his existence was defined by isolation and the hum of high-powered fans. He managed the hydroponics, adjusted the lighting schedules, and ensured the plants thrived, but his primary duty was surveillance. In this shadow economy, the gardener is the first line of defense, the human alarm system, expected to protect a fortune that isn't his. The pressure on men like Pepaj is immense. If the police raid the property, they face incarceration and deportation. If rivals strike, they face violence. And if they fail to protect the crop, the consequences from their own superiors can be severe. Pepaj had already experienced the crushing weight of this life. He had previously served time for similar offenses, only to be pulled back into the fold upon his release. Whether through coercion, debt, or a lack of alternatives, he was back inside a grow house, sleeping with one eye open. On that fateful night, he was the sole occupant, guarding a harvest worth hundreds of thousands of pounds, unaware that a convoy was already en route to challenge him. Converging on his location was a group that represented a very different facet of the criminal world. They were not a disciplined syndicate with international reach, but a loose collective of 13 individuals from Essex, united by greed and the promise of fast cash. This crew, hailing from areas like Hornchurch and Romford, specialized in taxing the slang term for robbing other criminals. The logic is simple and predatory: drug dealers cannot call the police when they are robbed. It is a high-stakes game of pirate versus pirate. The group was a chaotic mix of ages and backgrounds, ranging from teenagers looking to prove themselves to men in their 50s who should have known better. Among the most aggressive were Kieran Stewart, 20 years old and eager to lead; Kelvin Amoako, just 18, and Bartosz Malowski, 28. They were not elite tactical teams. They were opportunists who relied on overwhelming numbers and the element of surprise. Their intelligence on the Caley Road property suggested a soft target, a house full of valuable plants ripe for the taking, likely guarded by a single, frightened individual who would flee at the first sign of trouble. They believed this would be a routine in-and-out job. They had scouted the location, noted the blacked-out windows, and smelled the telltale aroma of cannabis. They packed sledgehammers to breach the doors, and oversized bags to haul away the loot. But their assessment was fatally flawed. They underestimated the fortification of the property, and, more importantly, the desperation of the man inside. As the convoy of vans and cars rolled silently into Tunbridge Wells shortly after 3:00 a.m., the stage was set for a collision between a man with everything to lose and a crew who thought they had nothing to fear. The quiet suburban street was about to become a battleground, and the easy raid they anticipated was about to spiral into a catastrophic struggle for survival. The digital clock on the dashboard read 3:15 a.m. when the convoy cut its lights and rolled to a stop outside the property on Caley Road. The street was silent, the suburban calm masking the violence that was about to erupt. In a coordinated movement that shattered the night, the doors of the vehicles flew open, and a stream of masked figures poured onto the pavement. They moved with a terrifying purpose, wielding sledgehammers and crowbars, their breath misting in the freezing December air. The first strike against the front door was not a knock, but a declaration of war. Glass shattered, wood splintered, and the barrier meant to keep the world out collapsed in seconds. Inside, Xhovan Pepaj was jolted from sleep by the deafening crash. In the disorienting darkness, the sounds of shouting and heavy boots on the floorboards left no room for doubt: the fortress had been breached. His training, or perhaps pure instinct, took over. He grabbed his phone, his lifeline to the network, and scrambled toward the upper level of the house. This area was designed as the ultimate safe room, separated from the rest of the property by a heavy, reinforced steel gate. It was the last line of defense, a barrier intended to withstand a siege, while reinforcements were summoned. As the raiders flooded the ground floor, tearing at the cannabis plants with frantic greed, 3 of them, Stewart, Amoako, and Malowski, broke away from the pack. Driven by adrenaline and the desire to secure the upper floor, they charged up the stairs, pursuing the fleeing gardener. Pepaj reached the gate and attempted to pull it shut, a move that should have sealed him in safety and left the intruders helpless on the other side. But in the chaos of the moment, something went wrong. Whether due to a mechanical failure or the sheer speed of the pursuit, the gate did not lock in time. Instead of a shield, the steel barrier became a trap. The 3 pursuers surged through the gap, just as the situation inverted. They were now on the landing, face to face with a desperate man who had nowhere left to run. The gate, now behind them, created a confined, gladiatorial arena, from which there was no easy escape. The dynamic of the raid shifted instantly. Downstairs, the rest of the crew continued to loot, unaware that above their heads, the mission had spiraled into a catastrophic standoff. The 3 men found themselves locked in a claustrophobic struggle with Pepaj. The shouting intensified, echoing off the bare walls of the grow room. What was meant to be a simple intimidation tactic had devolved into a close-quarters confrontation. The air in the stairwell grew heavy with tension, as the raiders realized their tactical error. They were no longer just thieves in a house, they were captors and captives simultaneously, sealed in a steel cage with a man fighting for his existence. And in the frantic scuffle that followed, a phone was dropped, or perhaps snatched, but the line remained open as silent, unblinking ear that was about to capture the irreversible escalation of the night. In the claustrophobic confines of the upstairs landing, panic and aggression collided. The three intruders, Stewart, Amahako and Malarski, found themselves locked in a frantic grapple with Pepaj. The reinforced gate, intended to be a fortress wall, had become the bars of a cage for everyone involved. Shouts reverberated off the narrow walls, a terrifying mix of languages and intent. It was in this whirlwind of confusion that a pivotal, almost unbelievable error occurred. Amidst the shoving and the desperate attempts to subdue the gardener, a mobile phone was wrestled from Pepaj's grip. Whether in a moment of utter confusion, or a bizarre attempt to summon help for themselves as the situation spiraled, one of the raiders, Kieran Stewart, dialed 999. The call connected instantly, but instead of a voice on the line asking for police, the emergency operator was met with the raw, unfiltered audio of a life-or-death struggle. For nearly 15 minutes the line remained open, transforming the operator into a helpless witness to the escalating violence. The recording captured a chilling soundscape, the heavy thuds of bodies colliding, the sharp intake of breath, and aggressive shouts demanding compliance. It was a chaotic symphony of a robbery gone wrong, broadcast live to a control room miles away. The operator heard the distinct, terrifying shift in the atmosphere, as the raiders realized the gardener was not going to submit quietly. Then, the dynamic shifted from a physical struggle to something far darker. The audio picked up specific, harrowing commands. Voices were raised, instructing one of the group to use a weapon. Kelvin Amoako, the youngest of the trio at just 18, produced a sharp implement. The subsequent moments captured on the call are the stuff of nightmares, not because of what was seen, but because of what was heard. The sounds of a severe physical altercation intensified, followed by the sickening silence of a struggle ending abruptly. Forensic analysis would later reveal that Pepaj suffered multiple severe injuries, with a catastrophic wound to the chest that ultimately caused his heart to fail. The operator, adhering to protocol but powerless to intervene, continued to listen as the frantic energy in the room dissipated into a stunned, heavy realization. The raiders, perhaps fueled by adrenaline, did not immediately grasp the finality of what had just occurred. They had entered the property to steal plants to tax a rival criminal, but they had crossed a line from which there is no return. They had taken a life. The phone, discarded or forgotten in the heat of the moment, lay on the floor or in a pocket, still transmitting. It recorded the confusion that followed, the heavy breathing of the men as they stood over the now unresponsive gardener, and the dawning comprehension that their simple raid had transformed into a major crime scene. Downstairs, the rest of the crew continued their task, oblivious to the tragedy that had unfolded just feet above them. They were still ripping plants from their pots, focused entirely on the loot, unaware that the operation was already over. The 999 call, still active, captured the bizarre juxtaposition of the mundane greed below and the devastating loss of life above. It was a digital fingerprint of the event, a piece of evidence so damning and complete that it would later become the cornerstone of the entire investigation. The raiders believed they were operating in the shadows, hidden by the night and their masks, but they had unknowingly broadcast their darkest act to the very people who would hunt them down. The silence that followed the fatal act upstairs was short-lived. Just as the reality of the situation began to settle upon the three men in the trap, the environment shifted once again. The sound of screeching tires and slamming car doors erupted from the street below. The Albanian network, alerted by Pepaj's initial call before the breach, had responded with terrifying speed. Heavy blows began to rain down on the front door and the barricaded entrance downstairs. The hunters had become the hunted. The raiders, who moments ago held the power of life and death, were now frantically searching for a way out as the reinforcements battered their way inside to protect what was theirs. Trapped on the upper landing, separated from their crew and facing the imminent arrival of a vengeful force, Stewart, Amoako and Malowski realized their only exit was not the way they came in. Panic replaced aggression. They turned their attention to the window, the only breach in their steel cage. In a desperate bid for freedom, they smashed the glass and kicked out the frame, the shards falling onto the porch roof below. One by one, they scrambled out into the freezing night air, abandoning the fortress they had fought so hard to conquer. They dropped from the porch to the driveway, clutching whatever bags of cannabis they had managed to grab, and sprinted toward their getaway vehicles. The scene on Caley Road dissolved into absolute chaos. The rest of the Essex crew, hearing the commotion and seeing their leaders flee, abandoned their positions. They piled into their vans and cars, engines revving as they sped away, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. In their haste, bags were dropped, and cannabis plants were scattered across the tarmac-green debris, marking the path of their retreat. They had come for a fortune, but they left behind a catastrophe. Behind them, inside the violated house, Xhovan Pepaj lay silent, the victim of a raid that had spiraled beyond anyone's control. What followed in the hours after the escape is perhaps the most chilling aspect of this entire case. As they drove back toward Essex, the adrenaline of the escape morphed into a delusional sense of victory. Unaware that the 999 call had captured every second of the tragedy, and oblivious to the fact that they had left a man lifeless, the crew began to celebrate. They pulled out their phones, not to call for help or check the news, but to document their success. In a display of staggering hubris, they filmed themselves laughing and bragging about the haul. Videos recovered later showed them posing with the stolen plants, high-fiving, and recounting the thrill of the raid. They mocked the resistance they had faced, completely detached from the gravity of their actions. They believed they had pulled off the perfect crime, a taxing mission that would pay out in thousands. They had no idea that while they were uploading clips and sharing jokes, the police were already listening to the audio of the fatal event, matching voices to the faces now celebrating on screen. The digital footprint they created in those euphoric moments would become the final nail in their coffin, a stark and ironic contrast to the somber reality of the life extinguished back in Tunbridge Wells. They were celebrating a robbery, unaware they had just documented their own involvement in a homicide. The celebration of the Essex crew was cut short with brutal efficiency. While they were busy reviewing their own footage and counting the potential profits from the stolen plants, the machinery of the Kent and Essex Serious Crime Directorate was already in motion. The investigation that followed was a masterclass in modern forensics, weaving together digital footprints and physical evidence into an unbreakable net. The cornerstone of the prosecution was, undeniably, the accidental recording. That 15-minute audio file did what no eyewitness could. It placed the jury inside the room at the precise moment of the tragedy. It captured not just the chaos, but the specific intent, the commands, and the chilling indifference that followed the fatal act. Detectives meticulously synchronized the timeline of the 999 call with CCTV footage from the neighborhood, tracking the convoy's arrival and frantic departure. But the raiders had left more than just digital echoes. In their panicked exit, they had discarded items laden with DNA, and the interior of the getaway vehicles yielded further biological proof. When police moved to arrest the 13 men involved, they found the final pieces of the puzzle on the suspects' own phones. The very videos the crew had filmed to boast of their exploit became evidence of their depravity. The juxtaposition was jarring. The jury saw young men laughing and posing with bags of cannabis, time-stamped, just moments after they had left a man perishing on a landing. The judicial reckoning was severe. In late 2023, the gavel came down on a case that had spanned multiple trials. Kieran Stewart, the man who had inadvertently dialed the police, along with Kelvin Amoako and Bartosz Malowski, were found guilty of the most serious charge. They received life sentences, with minimum terms ranging from 22 to 26 years. The court did not accept their defense that this was merely a robbery gone wrong. Under the law of joint enterprise, the intent to cause serious harm implicated them in the ultimate price. Xhovan Pepaj paid. The remaining 10 members of the crew faced substantial sentences for manslaughter and conspiracy to rob. In total, the group was handed over 100 years of prison time, a collective lifetime forfeited for a few bags of plants Yet, as the prison doors slammed shut on the Essex crew, a grim reality remained. The case on Caley Road was a victory for the justice system, but barely a blip on the radar of the organization they had targeted. The Albanian criminal networks that established the Grow House viewed the loss of the Cropand, the loss of Xhovan Pepaj, a mere operational overhead. These groups operate with a corporate resilience. When one branch is severed, another grows instantly in its place. The house in Tunbridge Wells was boarded up, its secrets exposed, but across the UK, thousands of similar suburban fortresses remain active. Their lights humming behind blacked-out windows, guarded by the next wave of gardeners working off their debts. The tragedy of Caley Road serves as a dark parable of the modern underworld. It exposed the lethal friction between the disorganized greed of local gangs and the entrenched, ruthless efficiency of international syndicates. The raiders lost their freedom, the gardener lost his future, and the neighborhood lost its innocence. But the industry that fueled it all, it continues to thrive, silent and unseen, waiting for the next collision.